there, YouTube. Doc's Motorcycle Service. Rawr, 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 rawr. Welcome back to the shop. Today we're going to talk about the actual electrical install and the inspection process, and we're going to go into that a little bit more deeply. Keeping up with the series, in the previous video, and there ought to be a little link right here, we talked about the erection of the building and getting that up. So in this video, what we're going to talk about is when we actually brought the electrician in and the inspections and dealing with a county planning department or inspection department or whatever they want to call themselves. In the previous video, I talked about how we started digging and then found out that we had to have a building permit, and I did not know we had to have one of those. I felt like in America I didn't need anybody's permission to erect something on my own property. I guess you do. So anyway, after we got that situation remedied, jumped in the pickup truck and we took off down to the county building to chat with them about a permit. This is trip one. Yeah! Get down there, fill out the necessary paperwork, answer all their questions, and basically, because we were building a concrete foundation with an enclosed metal building on it that was going to be electrified, it was going to be more money, which I think this is what it comes down to anyway. But bottom line is we had to answer questions about the size and the number of outlets, and we'll talk about number of outlets in a little bit. All these things. Well, they really got their back straight and their neck all stiff because I was digging on my property without their permission, and it really slowed down the process. So as I mentioned before, go to your HOA, go to your city, go to your county, find out what they will allow, and then mend yourself together, read it thoroughly, okay, and then proceed from there. But bottom line, met with them, filled out the paperwork, put the money down, and then left. Came home. Now my timeline's a little blurry on this. I know the building was completed on October 11th, and I know that we started installing the breaker panel that we're going to talk about today on October 24th. So one trip down, filled out paperwork, put our money down, came home. We found out while we were at the office that we were going to have an environmental inspection because we have a septic tank on the property, and they had to make sure that the building would not impact our septic system. And then they needed to come out and look at the building site to determine that it met their guidelines. I don't remember what those guidelines are, but the city variance or the city ordinance said that it couldn't be in front of the house, it couldn't be beside the house, it had to be behind the house, and it couldn't be taller than the house. So that was what the city wanted. The county, they just wanted to make sure that it wasn't close to a property line, too close to a property line, and they wanted to make sure that it was not going to interfere with the septic system. All right, so left. It was during this period that we came home one day, I don't know, let's just say 5 days later, to find a cease and desist order on the front door and on the build site saying, stop what you're doing, we need to do our stuff, we need to inspect this. Now the first inspection was for the environmental, the location of the septic tank. Why they could not do the environmental inspection while they were here is beyond me. Okay, so one trip out here from them to put up the cease and desist order, and this just tickled me to death anyway. They put the name of the order addressed to the guy who previously owned the house. I'm like, that boy didn't put the money down, so y'all need to get your act together. But I wasn't going to start pulling strings then. So cease and desist order went up, and then I'm going to say that it was probably 5 or 6 days later that we got notification that the environmental inspection had been completed and that everything was good to go, and that they were going to come out on, let's just say 5 days later, to check the footers. Now the footers, if you'll go back to I guess it was video 1 of the building, or maybe the update, I'll put a little link right here. And if I can find a picture, I'll put a picture up here too of the footers. This is the perimeter of where your slab goes, and it goes deeper than the bottom of the slab is going to go. And they're called your footers, so they lock everything in. There's rebar in there to strengthen them. So I called the concrete guy and I said, hey man, they're coming out in the morning to check the footers and inspect the ground. He's like, hey, walk out there real quick and tell me what you see in the footers. I'm like, okay. So long story short, if there's anything in your footer, if there's one leaf in your footer, they can fail you. So I walk out there and I'm like, yeah man, it's full of leaves from the leaves falling. He's like, all right, is there any water in there? Is there any mud in there? And I'm like, yeah, there's a little mud on the back corner. He's like, all right. He says, blow the leaves out, and I'll be out there in the morning, hopefully before the guy gets there, to get that mud out. Mud in a footer can fail. Okay, so sure enough, the next morning, the guys were here early. My boy was out here digging out the mud. Good conversation with the inspector. I'll give you that much. Good conversation with the inspector. Apparently in this county, although they have multiple inspectors, you get an inspector who's assigned to your job who handles you start to finish. All right, so good conversation with him. He wasn't really getting bent out of shape over the leaves. He's like, because I know you're going to get more leaves in there before the concrete trucks come, because concrete trucks aren't coming today. He's like, but officially, let's go ahead and get that mud out. So took a shovel, dug the mud out. He passed us, boom. And this is when the foundation came out and got poured. And I'll try to link to that little video up here as well. So I got a call or an email from the inspection office saying, hey, we don't have a copy of your stamped engineering plans. I'm like, okay, what's a stamped engineering plan? Was my reply. And they said, you got to get those from the manufacturer of the building because we don't have any on file for your building and the county. Okay, so took a day off from work, or a morning, took a day off from work, went to the manufacturer, or went to the builder, the guy we paid money to, and told him what we needed. He printed out 89 pages of stamped engineering plans. So now I take off back down to the county office. That's trip number 2. Yeah! Drop them off, go to work. All right. 2 or 3, 4 days later, get a call or an email saying that the stamped engineering plans that we dropped off are stamped engineering plans for 3 different types of building. Basically, your building, but there's 3 different ways. There's 3 different buildings encompassed in the plans of your building. We need to know which of the 3 ways is your way. Okay, take a day off, head back down to the county building. That's trip 3. Yeah! Pick up the plans, go to the builder, manufacturer, whatever you want to call him, explain the process. So he goes through all 89 pages of the stamped engineering plans, circling every option for our building. Take off and go back to the county office. Trip 4. Yeah! Then we wait. 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 days later, get a call or email saying, we can't find your plans. You need to resubmit them. Now YouTube, every one of us has that moment lurking deep inside of us. It doesn't come out often. But inside every one of us is that moment when we're just about ready to have it come apart. And everybody responds to it differently. Some people, their blood pressure rises, their heart rate increases, their face gets red, the veins start popping on their neck, they start breathing really hard, screaming and yelling. I'm a little different. I just pretty much get a blank stare. My breathing remains pretty normal. If anything, my heart rate actually decreases a little bit. And I start to talk in a very low, calm voice. And those people that are my brothers, those people that grew up with me, and those people that know me, know that at that point, something's about to get destroyed. Okay. About to get destroyed. Either physically or verbally. So I call down to the county office. And when the little girl answers, I said, I need to talk to the HMFIC. Now, if you don't know what HMFIC stands for, Google it. And when this old boy got on the phone, I introduced myself. I gave him a short version of everything that I had been through. And then I said, you need to find my plans. If not, I'm going to come down there and help you look for them. And you probably don't want me to come down there and help you look for them because you're not going to like the results of that. So I appreciate your time. Look forward to hearing back from you. And I hung up the phone. And about an hour later, he called back to say that plans have been found and that the guy would be out there tomorrow morning to inspect the building. Fair enough. All right. So guy comes out and inspects the building. We had a little hiccup. I'm not going to go into that because it would be very, very hard to explain on camera. But we got the building erection, or got the building approved. Now, according to my notes, my electrician came out on the 24th of October. And we're going to take a look at those pictures now, and I'm going to show you what we did on the 24th to get ready. Because what we had to do was we had to get a panel up, we had to get a outlet up, and we had to leave those open so that he can inspect them. And now let's go ahead and take a look at those pictures and what we did in here. And what we did was we went ahead and put some fire retardant plywood up. Didn't have to, but he suggested it, and again, like I said before, go along with the suggestions of your electrician because these guys know what they're doing. Hung the panel by one screw, and then you'll see here in a minute what we did was we put a level on it to get it straight. It ain't straight right here because we're marking where we want the hole. You'll see that we knocked a panel out, a circle out in the lower right hand corner of the panel. Once we got it straight, we went ahead and marked on the plywood where we wanted to drill the hole through the plywood, through the insulation to the outside. And it was through that hole that we ran the main, I don't know if this is a cord or a cable. Right here was one of the two grounding rods that we ended up putting in there. Another look at the panel here. Now we've stripped that protective coating off of the cables, and now you can see we got a black, red, and a coiled weaved type cable coming through that hole and tying into the upper lugs of the breaker panel. Now this is the can, this is the meter box that goes on the outside of your building, and through the hole here in a minute you'll see cables come through it and then tie into the top of the lugs. We went ahead and stripped the protective coating off of that main, and then you tie them into the lugs. So you'll see there that we have the woven, the ground wire, I guess you might say, coming into the middle of the two top lugs, and then I guess we have our hot and our neutral tied into those two top lugs. And what will happen is the wires that come in, the cables that come in from the power provider will come in through the bottom, and they will attach theirs to the bottom two. Another picture of the ground. We also grounded the building as well as the box. Got the paper in it. Paper went in there to keep the birds out because you know birds will build a nest in anything. Where are we at now? Just some more pictures of the final part of the job. We're coming up to November 7th now, and we're still working in the dark, but we got the panels in. Now we're putting a breaker in, getting that we had to use the GFI, the code called for 1 GFI, so we decided to go ahead and put a GFI breaker in there so we would be up to snuff on code. And getting all the wires done with that. A little tech tip here, picture of the wall. You can see in the right hand side of the picture there, that's where we put our quad outlet. Quad stand for 4, which allow you to plug in 4 different things. And we used painter's tape to mark on the walls where we wanted everything out, where we wanted stuff. Like this right here is a quad, and we put the number 1 on it to show that we wanted that on circuit 1. Then we had another quad, and we put a 2 on that to show that we wanted that on circuit 2. The nice thing about this blue tape is it doesn't leave a residue, and it's real easy to write on. But a pro tip is that if you're planning a whole bunch of stuff, but you're not going to install that until after you get your final, you might want to take these down before the inspector gets there. Just a little hint. You can see out here on the road, I'm going to zoom in right there at those white flags is where the power line is going to go in, and we're going to have a line stretched over the road. You really can't see it, but that right there is the bottom of the power line on the other side of the road. And we're going to run power pole over here over the road and then under the ground all the way to just outside this wall right here. So November 12th came, we came home, and we found that they had come out and put the underground portion in. It looked great. We were happy. So I called the electrician and I said, hey man, we got underground tied in. So November 14th came, we came back out. Pretty day, we started pulling the cables. We had determined that we needed a man door light on the outside of the man door, and we had to pull wire for that. This is the box that we used to mount the light through the wall, and that's what it looks like before we put the light up, and that's what it looks like when we were done. So we had a old motion light laying around, and we really didn't know what we wanted to put up out there yet, so we just decided to put this light up as a light to get us through the inspection and get the final electrical approved. And it worked out great, but I will caution you, do think about not doing this in a hurry. Think about the light that you're going to put up there, because the light that we eventually put up there that we will look at in a later video, the globe on that light came really, really close to the door jamb, and we eventually put a storm door up, and it was really, really close. I was afraid we were going to have to move it, but we'll talk about that later. Well, there you go. So that's where we're at. We now have the panel up, we have a quad up, we have a switch at the door, we have a light on the exterior, and we have underground. The underground portion of the power has been run to the property, and if I didn't already talk about it, I happened to be here when the inspector came by, and I wasn't here for the other electrical or the other inspection when he came by the first time. The first time he came by, he liked the panel, he liked the openness, he liked the wiring, but as it turns out, we didn't have a light by the man door, so we had to have a light by the man door, so had to get that throwed up. But I happened to be here for him when he came back out for the final inspection. That's why I talked to you about those that blue tape, okay? So I'm a visual person. You may be or you may not be, but it's a lot easier for me to take a piece of blue tape and mark something on it and stick it somewhere, and in my mind I see that. You know, we used that to our benefit when we were laying out the foundations of the building. If you go back and look at that video, we had 2 layouts, a yellow flags and orange flag. And even when the contractor came out to look at the slab before taking any trees down, he's like, man, this is a great idea. He said, I'm glad you did this. It really helps me see where this is going to go. But anyway, that blue tape, You got to do you. Okay? And I do me. But in my state, once you get your electrical final, okay, approved, the building's yours. You can do anything you want to inside it after that. It's yours. Now, I wouldn't recommend you doing anything sketchy with the electrical. But once you get your electrical final, it's done. It's yours. There's no reason for them to come back out. We scheduled our final, and old boy showed up, and he came in, and he looked at the light by the man door, and then he came in, and he looked at the panel again, and he looked down at the quad 4 outlet down there and by it, and he just kind of looked at me like, and I looked at him kind of like, and then he looks from me over to the panel and down at the quad, and he looks back to me. Now keep in mind, this panel, you see it's about this big. This thing probably hold 40 breakers in it. And we just got one little quad outlet on the bottom and one switch. So he's looking at me, and what went unsaid was, why do you have such a large panel? And I just put the poker face on. He looks at it again, looks back at me. And I might have flinched a little bit, but I was like, you know, things are hard to get. That was the only panel we could find. And at that moment, what could have been the briefest of curls just started to form right there at the corner of his mouth. And at that moment, he knew I knew the game. I didn't know the game. I was made aware of the game by my electrician. My electrician first came out here to walk the building. He walked around, looked at it, and he said, okay, so tell me what you're thinking. And he stood over there in the corners. I went around and did this and this, this and 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 this. And he got done, and I was like, so what do you think? He says, I think that's doable. I think that'll work. He said, but we're not going to do that. And I went, we're not going to do that? He said, no, we're not going to do that. And I'm like, why are we not going to do that? He's like, because people like to justify their job. And the more you give them to look at, the more opportunity there is for them to find the various minute things wrong. He's like, so we're going to put a panel up. We're going to put a quad in. Now this is where we knew we needed the man door light. And he said, and we're going to call in our final. I went, okay. He says, now once the final's done, we can do whatever we want to in here, because he ain't got to come out here no more. So in my state, once you get your final, that's it. It's done. So he knew we was playing the game a little bit, and it's legit, but you do you, okay? I'm just saying. Make sure you understand fully where all this is coming from and whose responsibility and whose lap it lands on at the end of the day. All right, so where was I? But make sure you take down that blue tape before he comes. Real quick, I want to talk about that motion light again. Okay, so we threw that light up just to have a light up there for him to come out here and get. And I'll throw some more pictures up, and we'll talk about it more in depth in the next video, the video after next. But that light's like this big. It's got 2 globes on it about this big around. Well, the light we ended up going with has a globe on it about this big around. And it was by the Lord's mercy and grace that we did not have to cut another hole in the wall and move that outlet over to another spot to keep that globe out of the way of the door. So when you're doing this, don't rush it like I did. Take your time, figure out what light you're going to put there, and then put the hole approximate where it needs to be at to support that light. You'll see more of it later in the next video, and it'll make more sense when you see them side by side. So where are we going? It is now probably last week of July 2022. We've gotten a lot of stuff done, but the videos are working and we're getting everything brought up to speed. The next video, because in the timeline that we're following for this video, we still don't have power turned on here. But we got the underground portion in, but we don't have the pole in the ground, or we don't have the line over the road connecting it to the power. We'll go into the roll down door and the planning of everything that we wanted in here in the next video, and we'll talk about the roll-up door, we'll talk about some temporary lights, we'll talk about some temporary power, something that you haven't thought about. So as always, YouTube, I appreciate you coming by the shop. Rate, comment, share, ride safe, handle your business, save some money, and